Welcome to today's event. We are going to be talking about beating the pandemic blues. It's been almost a year of working from home, and I don't know about you, it's been taking a toll on me. And so we're hoping that the experts on our panel today can help us understand, like empathize with where we are, and hopefully give us tips on how to beat pandemic blues. And this is our agenda for today. We will have a welcome note from Women Who Code. There'll be speaker intros, and then the panel is going to begin. Every company that you see represented on the panel is hiring tonight, so please feel free to slide into people's DMs and secure that job that you've been eyeing for a while. And then online event best practices, please mute yourself when you aren't talking and turn on your video if you feel comfortable. We'd love to see you, but if you don't feel comfortable sharing your video, that's also totally fine. We're going to be taking questions from the audience. So if you have any questions in general, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll pass them on to the panelists, and hopefully they'll be able to answer them for you. So a little bit about Women Who Code before we start. Our mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. We see a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and tech leaders, and it's our goal to build a community of such diverse and incredibly talented women within Women Who Code. This here is our code of conduct. We're an inclusive community. We're here to empower everybody, regardless of who they are and what their background is, and any discrimination of any sort or language that is not inclusive will not be tolerated here. If you are curious to learn more about our code of conduct, feel free to visit womenwhocode.com/code of conduct. Okay, and with that, I'd like to hand over to Kristen, who's our moderator for tonight.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that introduction. And a huge thank you to Women Who Code for putting this event together tonight and for inviting us. I really appreciate it, and I'm super excited to hear about what our panelists and speakers have to say in terms of how they've dealt with the pandemic blues. So I'm going to ask our panelists to quickly introduce themselves. So by giving us your name, your role, and where you're working, and of course, any exciting details about what type of roles you're hiring for right now. So why don't we start with Laura?
Sure. Thank you, Christine. My name is Laura Service, and I'm a senior product designer at Article. Article is a direct-to-consumer company for high-quality furniture, which means we're able to bypass traditional retail spaces and pass back the savings to our customers. Article is the easiest way to create a beautiful modern space. We've achieved profitability since 2015 and have landed ourselves on Canadian Business's fastest growing companies in Canada list for the past 3 years, as well as the Globe and Mail's top growing companies for the past 2. So we've grown a lot. I think we have around 650 employees today, and we're still hiring. We have a number of back-end, front-end, and full stack roles that are open. I was specifically asked to do a shout out for an intermediate backend developer. So if that's you, please apply. I'm going to drop the link to our careers page in the chat now.
Thank you very much, Laura. And Patience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patience. I am a technical lead at Felix Payments. During the day, in my spare time, I am a director for Women Who Code. So some of you might have seen me around. So Felix Payments is a financial services company. We build mobile point of sale systems that function primarily on Android. We also have a couple of web solutions that are used by various small businesses and merchants across the world. We are currently hiring for software developers, full stack, who can work on either the mobile platform or the web platform that we have, or some of the backend services that we support. We specifically look for people with skills in Java and C++ and Kotlin as well. So if that's you, please feel free to reach out. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly. I am always open and ready to discuss more about Felix Payments. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you very much, Patience, and thank you for the fantastic job you've done organizing this event tonight. So super excited that you're also part of the speaker panel. And Tara.
Oh, Tara, you're muted.
Tara. But I'm sure it was wonderful. It was just a rehearsal, right?
Yes, it was an excellent moment of rehearsal. Yeah, thank you. So today I represent a Slalom Build or a chapter in Vancouver. Slalom Build is basically built as a service firm where we blend design, product engineering, analytics, and automation to create the modern technology products of tomorrow. So we are hiring an experienced design architects and senior architects. Our amazing capabilities of engineering and quality engineering are looking for hires as well. At the end of this discussion, we'll be sharing the link to the hiring board, so you're welcome to explore the opportunities.
Thank you very much, Tara. And I'll quickly introduce myself as well. My name is Christine Wiedemann, and I'm Director of Quality Engineering at Slalom Build here in Vancouver. So I work together with Tara. And like she said, we're hiring for all roles, so check out our career page. With that, I think we're ready to kick off this panel. And I'm going to ask Sensani to stop sharing the screen so we can get a good look at our panelists. And I have a number of questions that I would like to ask to start with, but I would also love for everyone to post your questions in the chat, and you can do that throughout. And I will try to go through as many of those questions as we can as well. And if you have a question that you want to direct at a specific person, put it in the text as well. So it's been over a year, and it's kind of crazy. I was looking back at what I was doing in March last year and how everything started sort of from my perspective. And I think it's been tough for all of us in different ways. And I think we've all developed different coping mechanisms. So the first question I would like to ask is maybe, what's been the biggest adjustment that you had to make once the pandemic hit? And I'll start with you, Laura. What do you think was the biggest change for you?
So a year ago, Article immediately had the entire company switch to working from home. And it wasn't like such a huge change for me. I used to freelance for quite a few years, so I was used to staying motivated and working from my dining table. But I think the biggest adjustment was collaborating on Zoom. I certainly felt a lot of Zoom fatigue in those first few weeks. I don't know why, but it was a huge energy drainer. It was harder than in-person meetings for some reason. I don't know what it was, but I think that was definitely the biggest challenge for me in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read research that says that it's actually more exhaustive for the brain to focus on 2D meetings, so like a video conference rather than meeting people in person, which I think is super interesting. And I hear you. Zoom fatigue, I think, is something we've all experienced to some extent. How about you, Patience? What was the biggest adjustment for you?
So right around the time that the pandemic started, I had actually just lost my job and I was looking for a new opportunity. So the biggest adjustment for me was trying to get my network going and trying to find more opportunities, even as many things were closing down. And yeah, it was really difficult because lots of people were uncertain of where they were going. All the interviews that I had lined up at the time were suddenly canceled, or I couldn't reach people because they'd suddenly switched to online work environments, or they weren't really sure where things were going. So that was the biggest adjustment for me. learning to build my network online.
I have to ask you more questions about how you address that, because I was in a similar position. I started job hunting in February last year, which was a terrible time. It didn't seem like a bad time in February. And I have to admit that even after a year, I still haven't quite figured out how to network virtually. I find it super challenging.
I think one of the things that's helped me the most is having the Women Who Code community, because from there I've met a lot of people who were either hiring or who knew about positions that were open or who could give me referrals. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to do that and to be able to give back to this community, because I feel like I've gained a lot from being part of this community.
So we're all basically in the right place tonight. That's great. Thank you very much, Patience. And Tara, what was the biggest adjustment for you when the pandemic hit?
I think for me, it was blend of professional and personal, and I don't separate them because they are inseparable for me. My largest challenge professionally was that I started my first project at Slalom Build working remotely. And that was completely new experience for me as a new hire as well. Like figuring out how you actually facilitate online workshops with clients in United States when not everyone is appearing on the camera. You don't read faces, you don't have access to that privilege to kind of like actually being able to connect to people and read their reactions and goes like through like series of interviews with the stakeholders and taking notes and then interpreting this. I think that the amount of work that was done in the first 2 months, just like figuring out and establishing my own process was the biggest adjustment. And personally, you know, like going through these challenges, I just had to figure out how I provide myself with all the essentials to remain stable, grounded, and keep performing. So there was like an extra challenge. So I think that it's kind of like figuring out how I could nurture myself, ground myself in order to be able to perform and like deal with everything that comes constantly, and kind of like not having an idea like what else would come or like what should we expect. So it was like a big time of like unknown uncertainty and like just adjusting on the daily basis basically.
No, and I think there's something I reflected on a lot recently, is that one of the biggest challenges for me last year too was the uncertainty, like you just said. And I was following in the news and every day something had changed and there were different rules or guidelines and recommendations all the time. And I find that part is a little bit different this year. I think I have a better sense of what the lay of the land is for whatever it's worth. But I think it leads into another interesting question. We're in a slightly different situation now than we were a year ago, of course, and people are getting vaccinated, things are moving in the right direction. And I think at least some of that uncertainty is gone. But we're still in a different stage than we were 2 years ago. So are there any new challenges that you've encountered in 2021 that still relates to the pandemic? And I'll start with you, Patience. What do you think?
So I can think of a couple, wondering which one should go first. The first thing is beginning this year, we found a spot for an office because many of the employees were fatigued from working from home because it felt like they were living at work. So they wanted a different space where they could take their work. So we got an office at the beginning of this year. And one of the things that I really struggled with was going into office using transit. I had this fear that I would catch a thing on transit. So it was very stressful for me to go in. The second thing is because you're used to being in isolation at home, when you go in the office and you're surrounded by voices and noise, it tends to be quite draining in the beginning. And then you sort of build up a little bit of resilience to it. But even as you move back, because we work on a more hybrid model, 2 days in, 3 days out, when you go back, it still feels the same. It's very overwhelming to have people around you and then go back into isolation. Yeah, those are what I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's one of my personal concerns. I'm first of all very much an introvert. I love being with people, but it also makes me very tired. And I think the first day when I'm in an office with people again, I don't know how long I will last, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be 8 hours. So that really resonates with me. Thank you. And how about you, Tara? Do you find that you have any different challenges this year relating to the pandemic compared to sort of where we were a year ago?
Yeah, well, like the first year, especially the first half of the last year, it was all about an anxiety and uncertainty, as was said. And then we kind of like we were having and hoping that things will change soon. And now, as we transition to a new year, and I feel like there is a stretch, and we are still kind of like hopeful, but that hope is kind of slightly disappearing, or like how. So I think that the challenge is like how we maintain that sense of optimism, or but still being grounded and like realistic. So how we basically adjust, and like the question is like, are we going to be back to where we were, or now like just acknowledging that it probably won't be the same, and then the question is like, okay, so how are we going to adjust? And it's kind of like a new set of questions and concerns, and like how are we keeping up that sense of optimism and connection? Because I think that the other thing for me is also feeling that people are kind of like getting more distance. Like we used to connect a lot, and since now like many of us having certain digital fatigue, we are taking some break and distance, and that causes also some sort of like disconnection. So how do we maintain or establish new rules of engagements to still remain connected in that realm?
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of us have experienced, right? There's a different type of fatigue, this whole fatigue with being in this state that feels like it's something that should end at some point. So you're building your hopes up, but you also have to be realistic, like you said, and stay in good spirits without having unrealistic expectations somehow. Well, thanks for that, Tara. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I completely relate to Tara. Just like I think after a year of working remotely, just missing the connection with people. And at Article, we didn't have a work from home policy before. And after a year of just like working at my dining table, I really feel like I need a proper home office space. And at work, we're having a lot of conversations about what the work environment is going to look like in the post-pandemic world. And I think a lot of people have different ideas of what that looks like. And I think the different teams at Article are kind of trying to navigate that. Like, there's not really a cookie cutter solution for how it's going to work when we're all able to go back. Like maybe some teams are going to end up being fully remote, like the tech team, I think, is pretty happy with that work from home environment. But I mean, we have like warehousing teams and photography teams, and they'll definitely need to be on site. So we're having a lot of these conversations right now with HR and just kind of figuring out what that'll look like. But I think at this point, I'm just really keen to know what the answer is. Like, what is it going to be like? Because there's still a lot of just unknowns right now. So I'm looking forward to more clarity on the future. And
yeah, and I think a lot of us, and I certainly have asked myself that question too, because now that it seems like that's maybe on the horizon, at least being able to work out of an office again, how is it going to work? Is everyone going to go in at the same time? And I know there are some people that really long to be back in the office and don't necessarily have the setup at home that's very comfortable or convenient. And there are other people that might have a longer commute or have a really comfy chair and they don't want to leave their home office. And I don't think anyone has the answers, and it's something that's going to be interesting to see how we figure out together and hopefully learn from each other.
mm-hmm.
I wanted to go back to something that Patience mentioned, which was the phrase that some people feel like they're living at work since we're all working from home. And I know that I'm lucky enough to have a spare bedroom I can work out of, but it's conveniently located between the kitchen and the restroom. So I don't necessarily have to move much through the day, and it's a little bit weird. And I picked up this habit of going for a longer walk every morning before work to just get a sense of separation between my personal life and starting a work day. So I'm curious to see how you approach that. If you feel like it's not an issue at all, it just works seamlessly, or that you've had to think more about setting boundaries. And I'll start with you, Tara.
I actually need a moment to think about it, if you don't mind, Christine.
Not at all. No, it's an interesting question, I think, and I thought of it too, because again, Patient talked about living at work, and you were mentioning too, Tara, that to some extent, I think our personal and professional lives have blended. And I think there's an aspect of that that's probably actually good. We should all be able to be our genuine selves at work. But is it also a problem, and is something you had to think about? So I'll go back to Patience. Are you okay answering that question first?
Sure. So, well, the situation's kind of changed for me now because I do go into work twice a week, and I found that that separation really, really helps. Prior to going in, twice a week, I would work all day pretty much, and then I would take like an hour or two break to watch TV, and then I would work until midnight. And it got to a point where I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing until I was talking to someone else and they were asking me, so what have you been doing this week? So what did you do? And what did you do? And all I ever talked about was work, work, work. So now with us going in twice a week, I actually get to chat with my colleagues and bring some variety into my day. We're in a really cool spot in Yaletown, so we go out sometimes, grab some lunch, or I will go out and try a new spot, and that kind of takes me away from work. And I actually have something else that I can share besides the fact that I work when I talk about my life, which is something that I'm happy about.
So do you find that now that you're going into a physical office, has it changed how you work the days you're working from home too?
It has changed because now I'm actually conscious of the fact that, around this time I'll be coming back, so I wouldn't be working. So now I tend to step away more when the day is over. I tend to close my laptop a bit more. I'm starting to exercise as well. I'm trying boxing and different other things with the time that I was directing towards all of that. So yeah, it has really improved my quality of life and my mental state as well.
Well, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Patience. And how about Laura? Has this been something that you've thought about a lot, or just not been an issue at all?
Like the work-life balance thing and how to manage that
Yes.
during the
Does it feel
pandemic.
like you're living at work now, or do you feel like you have good boundaries, or do you feel like maybe you don't need boundaries?
I personally, I have pretty good boundaries. Like I was saying before, I used to freelance, so I was kind of already used to working from home. But I think the main difference is that now I'm working a 9 to 5, where when I was a freelancer, I kind of made my own schedule. So I found the work-life balance to be like a bit healthier, where I could, if I just like was kind of not able to focus, I could just go for a run or something like that. But I do sort of feel kind of glued to my computer and to like our work communication channels from 9 to 5. But it's still like, I think there is a little bit of flexibility in there. Like article is pretty, I think they're pretty good at like saying, okay, you're professionals, you're adults, you're going to get your work done. So I think we can give ourselves a little bit of grace if we need to take like a little bit of time for ourselves in our work days. And then just know that we have to get the job done at the end of the day. I think some other ways that I've dealt with it is putting away my computer at the end of the day, like actually putting it out of sight. So there's like, it's a little bit annoying because I never ended up bringing my big monitor home. I've just been working on my laptop which is, it's a little bit frustrating, but it's a little bit easier to kind of hide it afterwards. And then like my home is no longer my office. So those are some like techniques that I use. Yeah, I don't know if I can think of anything else, but if something comes to mind, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's when it comes to being able to put the laptop away. So before the pandemic, I had really made a point of not setting up a home office. I would only just bring my laptop out if I needed to work from home and then put it away quickly. And I really liked that. And it took me a long time to accept after the pandemic that I kind of had to do a little bit more to be just comfortable ergonomically. But at least, again, since I'm fortunate enough to have a separate room, I can close the door and not see things. And that really helps me. If I had to look at it, I think I would personally have a little bit of a harder time shutting it down. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely.
And how about Tara?
Yes, I actually thought about it. So I think work-wise, I just learned, like I kind of missed that transition when you wake up in the morning at your home, you have a breakfast, you dress up, you go out, you have some time to even like to do that mental transition from your home to work. And not having that in a working from home mode kind of like challenged me to like come up with some ideas. So how do I actually set myself for success on the daily base? And that was like a little adjustment of dressing up at home and, like pretending myself being in the office. And, like that kind of like helped to keep myself more organized and focused on my work. And also managing my to-do list of personal tasks, which was important. Like my commitment to myself on the daily basis and having that in front of my eyes and checking off boxes, not only the working to-do list, but also a personal to-do list. Do I make sure that I take care of myself and give myself that personal time daily? And also like thinking, what can I do every day to kind of like inspire myself and bring the sense of novelty? And I think that what kind of, and that took me outside of my home and, like looking for some sort of activities that I can do and kind of like feel that separation from work and life. So make that distinction clearer, basically.
Yeah, you remind me of one of my favorite books, actually, the Checklist Manifesto. It talks a lot about different checklists and how to use checklists. And it talks about the emergency checklist that they have in the Cessna planes. And the first item on that list is, so what to do in an emergency in these small planes. And the first item is remember to fly the plane. Because in an emergency, we tend to get so distracted by what's going on and trying to solve that problem that we forget some of the basic things. And I think when you talk about making time for yourself and your own task, I feel that's what I've had to do for myself a little bit, to sort of remember to fly the plane, remember to live my life too. So I have a little mental checklist now to go for a walk every day, do some kind of learning every day, and something crafty or arts inspired, because those are things that are important to me and that I need to recharge, but it's easy to forget about. So yeah, your answer really resonates with me. Thank you, Tara. I should take notes tonight, I feel, and just create a little new inspirational list for myself with everything that's being brought up in the discussion. So we talked a little bit about challenges and we talked about coping mechanisms too. But it's not just about ourselves, right? It's also about the people we work with. And we all work for organizations where we're used to having those face-to-face interactions. So how do you identify pandemic fatigue in your coworkers? How can you tell if your coworkers are struggling? And I'll start with you, Laura.
Yeah, this was a really tough question for me. I think it's because I don't know if there's like certain cues that I look for. But I think you can kind of just sense and feel the stress when talking to one of your coworkers. But it's hard to know unless they like explicitly like come out and say like, oh, I'm really overwhelmed. I know in the beginning I was definitely in the beginning of the pandemic, I was feeling a lot of anxiety. I was really quick to share that with my team, that I was really stressed and feeling anxious and like finding it hard to focus in the beginning. And I think just communicating that to my teammates kind of opened up this like safe space where we could talk to each other about stuff like that. And we weren't being really private about it. We were kind of able to have an open dialogue. So that I think just being open myself kind of opened the door for my teammates. And I don't manage anyone, but my manager was really great to check in with us and just ask us like, how are things going? Are you okay at home? Do you need anything? What can I do? What can Article do to make working from home a bit easier for you and support you? So he was really good to check in a lot. And I really appreciated that. And I just felt like I was always safe to like say if I was struggling. And I think my coworkers felt the same way. And yeah, and I definitely have some friends at work, and we relied on each other a lot just to kind of check in and see how each other were doing.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had good support from your manager, and that in general you managed to create that safe and comfortable environment where people felt okay talking about what was going on as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So pretty lucky that way.
Well, that sounds very reassuring. Thank you, Laura. And how about you, Patience? Is this something that you've been thinking about or had to think about?
This is definitely something that I had to think about. I think we were in a meeting about a week or two ago with our CEO, and he was like, I can imagine if I'm feeling this tired, you all must be feeling extremely tired. And that resonated with me in the sense of I tend to look for signs of what I would feel if I was burning out in other people. So I know that when I'm starting to burn out, I get irritable, the quality of my work decreases, and I just really struggle to stay on task and on point. And this can sometimes show through to other people. So in the event that I'm working with someone and I know they're really great and they're usually bouncy and bubbly in the mornings, and suddenly they've just slow change in attitude, the work quality has decreased, and so on and so on. I think it's time to have that conversation of maybe you need some time off so that you can recharge, because you're definitely seeming like you're really tired.
So being very sensitive to people's behaviors, things they say and do, and knowing, I guess, your coworkers too, so you can tell if something is changing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, one thing that I noticed is a lot of my teammates didn't want to take vacation during like the last year, just because they couldn't go anywhere, right? So like no one wants to do a staycation, but it was like a good reminder that like we still need to take time off for ourselves and to just decompress and like reset, kind of. So I think I didn't like particularly notice or want to mention it to anyone else, but I know some of our managers were following up and saying like, take your vacation, like you just need this time for yourself. And I truly believe that's really healthy to just kind of take a step back and take a deep breath and step away from the computer for a little while.
Yeah, and I think you're right that especially initially, no one really wanted to take time off because everyone's waiting for the pandemic to end, right? So we could travel again, but
But it never
I do
ended.
think it's valuable just to take a proper day and just be completely offline and go and do something nice instead. And how about you, Tara?
Yeah, I feel like like the responsiveness. There was a change in like the time people take to respond, and also the frequency of connection. Like our one-on-ones. I think that's at the beginning. There were so many channels created for us to have like an opportunity to connect, and I feel like at some point it just became too overwhelming. So I feel like people are kind of like taking back, and also like if it's a group connection or personal connection, like people start deleting the one-on-one meetings. So what used to be once a week became once a month. And I understand it. I feel the same way. I just cannot handle so many connections and so many channels and doing the work. It's just too overwhelming. So I understand that how easily we can kind of like get that fatigue. Um, yeah, and like some people are very open and they talk about it. So like that the person is struggling or going through the challenge. Some people, yes, you notice the voice, like you just hear that they're in a different space. So yeah, I think that I think that we develop certain sensitivity to read people behind the screens. So
Yeah, and you mentioned overwhelming, and what I think something I reacted to is that before the pandemic, there were many more choices for how to interact. You could go for coffee with someone, or you could go for lunch, or you could have a formal meeting, or you could do a phone call, or you could do a video call. Now I have to have the same type of interaction all the time with everyone. It's only video calls. And one thing that I miss desperately is phone calls. I miss, and it's not the same if you do a video call and turn your video off. It's not the same thing. And I think I really thrived on having different types of interaction with different people and in different contexts. And now it feels like there's one size fits all. And I think that's something that's definitely affected me.
I agree. I think it's the diversity of experiences that we have with different people, connecting with different people in different spaces and having different types of interactions. Yeah, makes sense.
And I think a lot of the time we were probably prone to, at the start of the pandemic, overcompensate a little bit and trying to set up a lot of meetings and a lot of interactions and really caring for each other. But then we probably all got a little bit overwhelmed and everyone took a step back and then it was not enough. And maybe now after a year, we're starting to figure the rhythm out, but it's tough. Even though a lot of us have worked at least partially remotely or distributed before, we haven't been in this situation. And it does kind of lead into another interesting question, which is, what has your organization done to support you during this period? And is there something that you would like to see them do differently going forward, or something additionally that you would like to see them do? And I'll start with you, Patience.
I think one thing, actually following our conversation the week or two that I mentioned ago with our CEO, he actually instituted a no questions asked mental health day that you can take with very, very minimal notice, less than 24 hours, just the day before. Let HR know that you won't be in and take your day off. Don't answer calls, don't answer texts, don't do anything, no emails, just take the time for yourself. And I am really grateful for that because I took I took that day. I was, as Laura actually mentioned earlier, I was not too keen to be taking time off because where are you going to go anyway? So during the meeting when he mentioned it, I was just like, well, I'm not even going to go anywhere. But then eventually he followed up with an email and he was like, no, it's okay. Everybody take the time off if you need it. And I realized I was really tired. So I took that day. And I was able to recharge. And when I returned on Monday morning, I was fresh, bright, and ready to go at it again.
I think that's a great idea. The idea of having a day where, again, there's no questions asked. You can just take it so you don't feel like you have to motivate why you need the time or have any good arguments for it. But is there something you would like to see organizations do more of as well?
Honestly, I would like to see this policy instituted across more organizations. I think it would be really helpful to have that one day that you can take and not worry about, can I justify it? Will this drag the release behind? Will my teammates be able to cope? Just having that option to be able to take that day for yourself, I feel is really important. And I wish many organizations would do that.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I think it sounds like a great idea. Thank you. And how about you, Taro? What do you feel what kind of support you have gotten from your organization? And is there anything that you feel organizations should do more of?
Well, I would split that question to two. So I think that build and slalom in general, there were different phases when they provided a different type of support. They were what I really appreciated about slalom is that they were very sensitive and responsive at each phase. So let's say at the beginning when there was like a huge uncertainty and like no one knew what happens, there was a very the way we've got together, like with the top leads that channeled the vision for, like adjustment. And the message was that, like we protect our people, we keep everyone together, like we're going to do our best to, like keep our people protected. And that gives a certain sense of security when no one knew what's going to happen. So I really appreciated it because I feel like everyone needed that, um, and then as we progressed, there was always like a large company like town hall events where, like all the quarterly and monthly updates they gave about the health of the business, the state of the business, where we are at, what are the projections, what is the situation. So I think just kind of like having that transparency on the business level kind of like also gives a certain sense of security and understanding that like, okay, we are good, like we are moving on, we are together and we support each other. Just feeling like multiple circles of support really helped. And I think that the last thing that I really appreciated, that the company announced that they're giving us a certain amount of money to invest in any type of activity that help us to kind of like cultivate the sense of well-being for the 2021. That also helped. That was a very generous and thoughtful action, in my opinion, to like, and it also brought lots of appreciation for the company that does like everything they can to support their people, and even like the recognition of importance of increased like attention to the well-being of people. So we're not only like working machines, we are human beings. So being seen and treated as a human being, I think it's huge, at least for me. So I think that like across the organizations, I actually, when I started answering, I didn't have the answer for that, the second part of the question, what organizations could do. So I think that my answer is, yeah, treating people and like letting people feel and know that people are seen as human beings would definitely be a big change.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because, of course, the pandemic has had a huge financial impact on most organizations. But to be able to see beyond that and really understand that the people are more important, and to make sure that everyone are cared for and supported, and it's something that I certainly really appreciate. So thank you. And Laura, what's your experience been?
Article has done a lot to support us. In the last year, I feel pretty lucky. In the beginning, they lent us a lot of gear like monitors, keyboards. We could request hardware from IT and they would courier to us at home. And then last year, they also gave a work from home stipend to every employee so that we could like set up our spaces and make them more comfortable and more conducive to work. And for a short period of time, they increased our employee discount so we could buy like a desk from the catalog. And so those were like pretty cool perks and just like really supportive and making sure that we were comfortable at home. I think before we already had access to therapy through our group benefits package. So HR was like reminding us that we can use that if we were struggling with anxiety or depression. And I think they also realized that not everyone had a good work from home setup. Like some people really struggled to work from home. So they actually allowed for a small number of people to come in and work from the office. And they had it like safe and distance with like proper contact tracing and everything set up. So that was really good because not everyone not everyone really gets a lot done at home. They might have kids or whatever. So that was pretty nice. And then we also have an events committee. I don't know if you guys know this, but article employees are called particles. So our events committee is called the Particle Board. And they planned a lot of like online activities like Zoom cooking classes and trivia nights. And in the summertime, there were even a few distanced in-person events like fitness classes in the park. So that's been really cool. And then I think one of the last initiatives that is really special is this, it's called the Coffee and Donuts Slack channel. And it randomly pairs up team members who don't regularly get to work together, and they can just like meet and have a virtual coffee. And this has been really nice for integrating new hires and helping them get to know other people at the company, because now that we're all working remotely, we don't have the water cooler or the kitchen where we get to meet up. So that was a pretty nice initiative. Yeah, I could ramble on about they're pretty good to us, thankfully.
Being a particle physicist by training, I really like that you're being called particles. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think, first of all, it sounds like you have had great support, which is of course fantastic. But I also agree that I like those sort of random matches between people that forces you to connect with someone you otherwise wouldn't necessarily talk to. Because of course, in this virtual world, you don't just stumble into someone, right? You have relationships, and I found that a lot of my existing relationships have gotten much, much stronger, but I have to be more proactive when it comes to building new relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just want to encourage our audience that's listening in too, that if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll be happy to pass those on to our panelists as well. So earlier on, we talked a little bit about motivation and how to maintain your motivation. So I would like to dig into that a little bit more and ask if that's something you found that you're more challenging working from home, or maybe it's easier for you, but have you had to develop any techniques for staying motivated? Has it not changed at all, or is it actually so that you're more motivated to work when you're working from home? And I'll start with you, Tara.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I think that, like in the normal mode, I would, I would be focused, or I just focused on like large goals, and, like just like kept up with my personal routine without like thinking much, but like keeping focused on the larger goals, and just like doing everything to make it happen. I think that with the pandemic, I just had to switch my focus to more like daily, and like taking it like day by day, and then also ensuring that, like checking in with myself every day, and like seeing how do I feel with myself, like, and again, like I take it first of all to my like personal foundation, because like ensuring that my personal foundation is, like is good, I feel happy, I feel healthy, I'm grounded, I'm good. If I don't, making sure that I provide myself with everything I need to feel good, and like keep going and make that day happen the best way possible. So I think that, like there is more effort nurturing that motivation and ensuring that I am motivated on kind of like on the daily base, instead of on, like monthly or, like quarterly base. So and I think that again, like keeping myself motivated is basically understanding, like what motivates me, what do I need, and then providing myself with these resources, or like being creative and brainstorming and finding a new ways to motivate myself. So, like things that motivated me a year ago might not work. So it's constantly basically checking in with myself, and, like seeing what I need. So I think that that's kind of, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, maybe that will all change again when you will go back to working out of a physical office. That will be quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like also like understanding that we need to like, we don't only adapt to, you know, like you know, like the global situation or like larger changes. We are also adapting. There is a huge uh, process of adoption that happens on the personal level, I think.
Absolutely. No, there's certainly macro effects and micro effects for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And how about you, Patience? Have you found that you have to develop any new techniques for staying motivated? It sounded like you were, if you were working to midnight, maybe motivation wasn't a problem for you.
So I actually resonated with something that Tara said, where she said the things that motivated her a year ago don't motivate her the same way now. So from the time that the pandemic started, and I finally got my job. I had just come from a really grueling job search where I was struggling to make connections and build a network because of all the changes that came in. So what really kept me motivated was, oh, I don't want this to happen to me again, and then have to redo this. So it really carried me for many months. And then it just got to a point where, because I was putting so much pressure on myself, I started to feel a little bit burnt out. So I had to pull back and be like, oh, okay, so it's time to look at new ways for me to be able to cope with continuing and staying motivated with my job and bringing my best self forward. So obviously I started to cut back on the number of hours that I was dedicating to work. And I eat healthy now, add in a little bit more exercise. I mingle with the panelists here at events. So that's really helped to keep me motivated. The other thing is I really do love the product that we work on. I love the challenges that it poses, and I really love what I do. So that's the other thing that also keeps me motivated.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the thing that pops into my head, weirdly enough, is the motivation I'm struggling with is doing dishes. Because I do eat more healthily working from home, because cooking all the meals at home. But I am not used to doing this many dishes all the time. So I think that's my main motivation challenge. Thank you. And how about you, Laura? Have you found that motivation, what drives you, has changed in any way, or that you need to um, develop new techniques for staying motivated?
Yeah, yeah. I can relate. I feel like my dishwasher is running all the time now. And I think the same thing, like getting exercise regularly and remembering to take the vacation, like that's like taking care of yourself. So so that you're able to do really good work and stay motivated in your professional setting. And this might sound really funny, but I like to remember that I enjoy my paycheck, which I'm kind of kidding about, but also not kidding about, because I have a job to do and I take that pretty seriously. So that kind of helps me just like check. But I think that comes from my freelancing days where I literally wouldn't get paid unless I did the work. So I find it's really easy for me to just remember that. And I think setting deadlines for yourself is really helpful. A lot of my projects are not deadline driven, but I kind of thrive on deadlines. When I worked in an agency environment, it was like very busy, and you had like a day where you were going to launch the product and it had to launch by that day because there was a lot of marketing and PR initiatives surrounding it. But Article kind of operates in a pretty different way. So I have just like made a note of like setting a deadline for myself and making myself accountable to get work done by a certain time. And then some other tips and tricks that I have. So like Zoom fatigue, I actually block off large chunks of my calendar for working sessions so I can get stuff done. Because I found I have a really hard time staying motivated when I'm juggling Zoom calls all the time. And I've actually started taking the authority to decline meetings that aren't relevant to me. And I'm still kind of working on this. And I think, Christine, you mentioned this like way earlier, that everyone felt like their calendar needed to be super full in order to like appear busy or something like that. So I think that that's still kind of happening in some ways. And So yeah, taking that in, like just making the decision, like I don't need to be in this meeting, and sometimes questioning whether or not it's required is like really important. Because I think as a designer, like my work is like, I have to be productive to get my work done. So I really need to manage that to stay motivated. And then I think that article could definitely look a little bit more at like best practices for meetings and different guidelines around like using Slack and when to use an email and when is a meeting necessary, especially if we're going to continue working from home after the pandemic. And like you were saying, Christine, like, what, like, can't we just have a phone call sometimes? Like, it would be really nice if the organization would kind of think about those things a little bit more, and just kind of set us up for being able to stay productive and motivated.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly something that sounds very familiar to me. And I think in general, we've never been very good at things like rejecting meetings or maybe safeguarding our own time. And one thing that I personally find very challenging now is that everything is booked back to back. And where are my bio breaks? And when do I get a glass of water? And in the natural world, in the pre-pandemic world, at least you were moving physically to a meeting room, there was always time to go grab a coffee or something on your way there. And people would trickle in a couple of minutes late and it wasn't a big deal. But now I feel much more pressure to always be on time, but yet every meeting is running over. So haven't quite figured that one out yet, but I'm certainly getting better at, if I'm gonna do something I need to do, I'm gonna be late, that's okay. And to be very careful to make sure I take my headphones off before I go do certain things. I do find that there are still things I am struggling with though, and I think in perfect honesty, that back-to-back meeting thing is probably one of my biggest struggles now. I probably also need to get better at declining meetings and all that, but that things are so really bleeding into each other, the activities and the task switching too is a little bit challenging. But I'm going to jump to you, Patience. What is your biggest struggle you find right now, something that you still are working with, and have you found any ways to cope around that?
I think I'd like to take a moment to think about my answer for that one.
Absolutely. I'll jump over to Tara if you're okay answering that question, if there is still something I'm struggling with.
Well, I think, like professionally, what I'm struggling with is how you ensure that everyone on the team is aligned and you still remain connected, and like you touch base daily and you communicate, your communication is clear. Basically, I think that the theme of communication is still a hot topic, especially when you work in a kind of like with a certain deadline. You commit to deliver certain product with certain velocity. So how do you keep up while communicating with multiple people and ensure that like everyone is aligned and like we're still connected? So I think that that's kind of like my main topic that requires constant work and attention. But I think that personally, I think like now back to kind of like the motivational part. I think that I'm also kind of like a bit challenged and like wondering how how I can keep motivating myself. Like what are the like like inventing and creating new ways to motivate, understanding that like I might not be able to go to the theater very soon, or like connect with new people. Like how do I create actually circles of like new circles within that situation? Like, because we are human beings, we are looking for connection, and we need that sense of novelty, connection with new kind of like people to kind of like get that ignition and inspiration. So I think that also kind of like been on my mind for quite a while.
Yeah, and that's again something I definitely struggle with, is that part around how to build new connections. I find that I certainly have a lot of connections and relationships that have gotten even stronger during the pandemic, but I'm not really building a lot of new ones, and I still need to work on that. So thanks for sharing that, Tara.
Sure.
And how about you, Laura?
Yeah, I actually didn't really think about the struggling to make new connections. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, because I definitely haven't made any new friends or made any new work contacts, professional contacts. Like, I think this is the first sort of networking type thing that I've done in the last year. So that does like resonate with me quite a bit. And I think after a full year of working from home and just not seeing everyone, I really just miss like social connection. And I think I prefer like the work from home environment, but I really like miss the office right now because you get to see people more regularly. So it's a bit exacerbated by being in like the second year of this whole COVID-19 situation. Um, and then yeah, like I mentioned before, I definitely am still struggling with the calendar thing, so working on that every day, trying to manage it a bit better.
Yeah, and going back to the whole about building new connections, it feels very binary now that either you sort of don't connect with people or you have to set up a formal meeting. And what I miss is those casual, just grabbing a coffee, something that doesn't feel very formal. It doesn't really have to have an agenda. Whereas now, if I want to talk to someone, I have to send them an email with a meeting invite, and it becomes much more of a big deal. So I find I miss those other ways to interact again. They're a little bit less rigorous again. And Patience, have you had a chance to think of something? And it's perfectly okay to not be struggling with anything either.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm one of those people that really thrives from variety, I'm finding. And I like to do a lot of different things, I find. And currently, what I'm struggling with is trying to make sure that I'm safe as I try new things. And I haven't really gotten to the point where I've learned how to balance that and how to pick out things that will be relatively safe for me to do or things that would not be safe for me to do. And even if something is safe, it's not a guarantee, right? You might go there, you might become exposed. So I always have, I guess, that fear at the back of my mind as I try something new and it kind of weighs on the activity I'm doing. So I don't really enjoy it as much as I would if I knew that nothing was going to happen. So I think that's the one thing that I'm struggling with at this point.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into an attendee question we just got, which is the person is asking what the panelists think about this phase we're going towards now that's between the pandemic and the post-pandemic state. And since we've been sitting at home for over a year, if it's taken a toll on us, and it sounds like that actually ties in a little bit to your that anxiety I think we can all feel around, yes, we want to go out and meet people, we want to do things, or like you, I've taken public transit and I am not comfortable doing it, but I still do it. I know it's low risk. I know there hasn't been any large transmissions or outbreaks associated with public transit, but it still feels strange. So do you feel that in general maybe has taken a toll on you over the last year?
Yeah, I think it really has, because prior to the pandemic, you never really thought about going into transit or whether something would happen to you if you touched one of those poles as you were balancing yourself when the train moves. There's definitely a lot to think about now. When you step in and someone sits next to you, you start thinking about whether it's safe to do that or not. Someone actually sat down next to me and I stood up in fright at some point. So yeah, it's definitely something that you carry along with you, and it impacts your enjoyment of certain experiences.
Yeah, and I think for me personally too, I haven't hugged another person except my husband for the last year. And I don't know if I know how to physically interact with other people anymore. And I'm worried that the next time I meet someone that I can hug, I'm not going to let go. Because it's as silly as it sounds, it feels like something is starting to sort of wither away a little bit, and that's how to interact with people naturally on a day-to-day basis, where you can actually have physical contact, where you can give someone a hug or shake someone's hand. When do you do that? When do you not do that? So not only am I anxious about the pandemic, I feel I'm building up all this other anxiety about things too that is a little bit silly maybe, but it's still there.
Yeah,
And
I've
Sarah, have
gone.
you? Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've gone for like a walk with friends, where we like wear a mask and go for a walk, and I find that I'm like drained after the interaction because I'm just not used to chatting with people in person anymore. So anyway, that just made me think about that.
Maybe the question I should ask, if there's anyone on the panel who hasn't had weird pandemic dreams in the last year. If you haven't, good for you. I've dreamt about masks and all sorts of weird stuff. But do you find that there are any other things, Laura, that you feel like is really taken a toll on you this last year?
I think fitness. Like I used to work out a lot before the pandemic, and I feel like I live in like a 600 square foot apartment, and it has to be my home, and it has to be my office, and it also has to be my workout space, which I found really just annoying over the winter because I wasn't going outside as much, and definitely not feeling comfortable going to fitness classes personally. So I've just found getting enough exercise to be a challenge, and that is like so important, I think, for mental health and well-being. So that's I think that's the one thing that's really getting to me.
Yeah, and I think it certainly working from home certainly made me realize how much I would walk normally on a regular day just by not thinking about it, and how much of a conscious effort it is now to get some exercise in and to do everything right. Whereas a year ago, I didn't really have to give it so much thought. Thank you. And how about you, Tara? Do you feel like a year at home has taken a particular toll on you?
Well, like being a lot in the mental space, like we do have job where like we spend lots of time like talking and like lots going on in our brains. And the beauty of the past life experience was that we could go outside, we could have different type of experiences that would distract us or like balance things out. So I think that like being a lot at home, working at home, being in the mental space actually kind of like made me think, how can I help myself to kind of like like balance things out. So I actually ended up finding a coach that would help me like with personal like one-on-one sessions once a week, just to be heard by someone outside of my circle, someone who has no connection to my like daily life, and talk to someone and like just being open about everything that goes on and being heard. I think that kind of like that helped. So I just felt like I needed some help from external source to get out of that like mental space and be helped. So
yeah, I think our worlds have in general really shrunk, funnily enough, in some senses, and our circles have shrunk, even though at the same time, when everyone is remote, you would think that we would have so much more access to people and events and things to do. But I feel that my world is much smaller. And there are some aspects of that I actually kind of like and appreciate. And there are some other that feel very constrained and a little bit claustrophobic almost.
Yeah, and like, and also like not having that necessary that type of distraction that kind of like helps me to step out from that shrunken version of my world. I think that's kind of like that's where I had to solution, like how to deal with that, like how to still step out and like create a balance.
I really appreciate everything everyone's been sharing tonight. This has been super interesting, and so many good thoughts, good ideas, and good trips. I would love to sort of wrap up this question section on a positive note. So I'm gonna ask you, what's your favorite either thing that happened in the past year since the pandemic started, your happiest memory, or something that's changed in a positive manner, something you appreciate? And for myself, it's kind of two things, I think. I appreciate my home much more. I've never spent this much time at home, and it's quite comfortable. And I really appreciate having had the time to just be in the space that I created for myself and where I feel comfortable. And both my husband and I have been working from home, and we've never spent this much time together. And I think for me, that's going to be the hardest change when we start working again, is to not spend every day with him. And we've been going for walks together in our neighborhood, and that's been amazing. And I've discovered so much cool things in the lanes. And that is a little bit of a silver lining for me, is having had that time together and being able to just go for a walk in the afternoon, which we've never been able to do before. So I'll start with you, Patience. What's sort of your silver lining in the pandemic, or something really good that you will remember when you look back on this time?
I think I actually resonate with what you just said. My sister and I became really, really close over the progression of the pandemic. We've relied on each other a lot. She's been very supportive with my career. I've also tried to support as much as I could with hers. And I feel like we became a really, really good team over the past year. And I'm always going to cherish that.
I love that. That's great to hear. Thank you. And how about you, Laura?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying about just like really valuing your home, your safe space, your like sanctuary a lot more. And I've also got to spend a lot more time with my partner. And I think like one really exciting thing that's happened, well, actually, I'll mention one thing before that, but I know how to make sourdough bread from memory now, which has been really cool. I definitely kept up making sourdough bread. I make it every week now. And my partner and I are actually expecting a baby, which has been really exciting, our first. So thanks. Yeah, it's been weird not getting to go to like new mommy groups or whatever, but I've been pretty fortunate that a lot of my girlfriends are also having kids right now. So I don't feel alone, and we're just really excited to welcome this little person in the summer.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, congratulations. And that's definitely much better than a silver lining.
Yeah. It's been a good distraction from the pandemic too.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Laura. And how about you, Tara?
To be honest, like many things to be grateful for, and like feel lucky. Like I think that the way we experience the pandemic in Vancouver is, I would say, very different from how people in other regions or part of the world are experiencing. So I think that like on the large scale, like being grateful for the work, being able to work, being paid and survive and sustain myself with dignity, and being able to support not only myself but others. I think that that's a very lucky place to be at, and a privilege. And yeah, and just being like in the space. I think that also being in the culture where people are actually very responsive to the like guidelines from the government. People are cooperating. The community teaches and inspires its people on how to adapt, how to adjust, how to respect everyone's choice, how they want to protect themselves. I think that our culture like is quite respectful to everyone's choices. And I feel like that's also a type of luck, because I lived in different cultures, and I know that people can, like, even like on the society level, can respond differently. So I think that they kind of like seeing how we come together and cooperate and being respectful for each other, and but in order to protect each other, I think it's also like a huge luck. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And I have to say, Patience and Laura and Tara, I really appreciate all three of you. And it's been great to hear about your experiences and everything you've shared with us tonight. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, Women Who Code. And I'll hand back to Senseni.
Thanks, Christine.
Thanks a lot, Christine. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. This was amazing. This was a really insightful and inspirational talk. I have one last slide to share with you, and it has information from the companies that are hiring and how you can reach out to them. So we've heard from 3 really great companies tonight, and all 3 are hiring. So feel free to reach out to Adam at Article, Ellie from Slalom, and Faline at Felix Payments. And feel free to mention that you came across their information through Women Who Code. As you heard, all 3 companies are doing really great things to support their employees during this really crazy and unprecedented time. So they are companies that we at Women Who Code fully endorse. So feel free to reach out to them. And we're excited to hear success stories of you securing and excelling in a role at one of these companies. Thank you again to the panelists. Thank you, Christine, for leading the conversation. And I feel like that brings us to the end of our programming. Thanks to all of you who attended and paid attention and sent questions. This was a really great conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
The list is that we were recording this talk, and we're going to be sharing it on the Women Who Code channels. If you're interested in sharing it on your own social media channels, feel free to let us know and we can send you the recording from the event.